I'm innocent, I didn't do it. That's the first thing that goes through my mind.
I didn't really understand the depth and the significance of anything.
Convicted for crimes they did not commit.
The first night I cried. It's the sound you hear when you hear the prison doors close.
Sentenced to unimaginable terms.
The judge sentenced me to 25 years of life. And I'm like, this cannot be happening.
They gave me 19 to 57 years.
Each paying a heavy emotional toll with countless time and memories lost.
The psychological torture, that was like a whole nother level.
I'm gonna die in jail.
Released into a world they no longer knew, struggling to find a path forward.
They expected that once they were exonerated, everything would fall into place. But it didn't, and it doesn't.
Tonight, a PIX11 news special, Presumed Guilty.
Good evening and welcome to this PIX11 news special, Presumed Guilty. I'm Ayana Harry here at Manhattan Central Park near 110th Street and 5th Avenue at the new Gate of the Exonerated. This gate is inspired by the acquittal of the Exonerated Five, once known as the Central Park Five. It recognizes the ongoing fight for justice. Black people make up 53% of wrongful convictions, 32% are white people for close to the same amount of cases. Tonight we'll introduce you to 4 people wrongfully convicted as teenagers, only to finally walk free as middle-aged men, and the strength it took to persevere. We begin with Mark Denny, who was presumed guilty, but then found to be factually innocent after spending more than 30 years in prison. It was unbearable at times and psychologically numbing.
I imagine myself as being a great boxer. I was into boxing. Even after I got incarcerated, I still continued to pursue that for a while until the spark fizzled out.
A spark doused by a 30-year sentence for a crime Mark Denny didn't commit. Denny was just 17 years old when he was sent to prison and 46 when he walked out a free man.
Looking back at my experience, if a person is truly innocent, that innocence will be discovered. Don't ever give up.
In January of 1988, police pulled over a car with Denny, his cousin Raphael James, and 2 other men. All 4 were arrested after officers found a gun under the driver's seat. And once Denny was in police custody, detectives began to question him about another crime, the burglary of a Burger King on Fort Hamilton Parkway in Brooklyn and the rape of an employee.
I was trying to explain to the cops, I don't know anything about a robbery. They took me down anyway. And, you know, they claimed my co-defendants already told me that I was involved. They wanted me to confess, and they just kept beating me and forcing me to confess, and I just couldn't confess because I didn't know anything.
The victim picked him out of a live lineup after seeing Denny's picture in an array of photos the day before.
They exposed me to the witnesses. They did a lot of stuff to me.
Charged with rape and robbery in the Burger King case, Denny soon learned the cousin that was in the car with him when he was first arrested was also a suspect.
When he got locked up for the Brooklyn case, he decided to drag me in with him. That's the part that still, you know, hurts me to this day because he was like a hero to me.
He wound up being tried with his cousin but maintained his innocence. There was no physical evidence tying Denny to the crime. Tell me about the day you learned the verdict.
On the day I got the verdict, I just cried. But I didn't really understand the depth and the significance of anything, even the word rape. You know, it's like I never heard the word before.
Denny was in the 9th grade when he was sentenced as an adult.
They gave me 19 to 57 years. My childhood mind started to think that, you know, I really wasn't coming home.
He began to fight his sentence right away.
24, 25.
It wasn't easy. He figures he spent half of his 30 years in solitary if you add it up.
The psychological torture, that was like a whole nother level.
In order to be eligible for parole, Denny would have to admit to the rape.
I just couldn't see myself admitting to something so ugly as that.
Finally, an attorney with the Innocence Project took on Denny's fight for freedom.
She gathered enough information that convinced her that, you know, I was worth her effort and her attention and her time.
it took another 10 years to free Mark Denny.
I really didn't believe the truth was gonna get me out because lies is what put me there.
Denny is now engaged and still finds himself trying to adjust to life outside of prison walls.
I have to try to make space for fun, I have to.
Mark Denny was finally able to walk out of prison because of the work done by the Innocence Project. It was started as a law clinic by 2 New York public defenders once they realized the powerful role that DNA could play in ending wrongful convictions. We sat down with founding partner Peter Neufeld to discuss the impact the Innocence Project has made. Since 1989, more than 3,000 people have been exonerated. That adds up to more than 28,000 years lost. Helping those wrongfully convicted reclaim their lives, the Innocence Project. Peter Neufeld is its co-founder and special counsel.
There was a development of this new technology called DNA.
That scientific development opened the door in the U.S. for the release of thousands of factually innocent people.
It was very clear to us that, wow, this is going to be an incredibly powerful tool to use to reopen old criminal cases.
How difficult is it to prove that an innocent person is actually innocent?
For years, it was extremely difficult to reopen old convictions. There was this doctrine in American jurisprudence called the doctrine of finality, which said that once a jury had spoken and once you exhausted your direct appeal, you're finished, okay? We don't want to keep reopening old cases. But what was amazing is that DNA stood that doctrine on its head.
The Innocence Project started in 1992 out of the back pocket of Neufeld and attorney Barry Scheck, with one other person answering the phone, plus help from students.
Very quickly, after we had our first couple of exonerations, we were inundated with hundreds and hundreds of letters. Today, we now get 2,000 letters a year from inmates claiming their innocence. I will tell you that I remember the very first time I went down to Virginia and walked a man out of prison. That's as good a feeling as you can have.
That sense of exhilaration overshadowed by the emotional toll wrongfully convicted people experience spending multiple decades in 6-by-8-foot prison cells.
Not everybody who is wrongly convicted and sitting in prison has the sense of self to live for 20 years.
Neufeld says innocent people are convicted for several reasons. Among them, an eyewitness was mistaken, a jailhouse informant lied, the misapplication of forensic evidence, and police and prosecutorial misconduct.
People plead guilty because there were 3 eyewitnesses who say, that's the guy I saw do it. Kirk Bloodsworth was the first person to be exonerated from death row. He was a guy who had been in the Marine Corps, was working as a bayman in Maryland, and he was identified as a murderer by 3 children, okay? They were all wrong. He was innocent.
But one reason that is very difficult to comprehend is a false confession.
When you're thinking about why people plead guilty who are actually innocent, you have to appreciate, number one, that there is this phenomenon called the trial penalty, meaning that the defendant is told, if you plead guilty now, you'll serve a year in jail. But if you go to trial and you're convicted, you'll serve 20.
There are also forced confessions by police. Those techniques are now under scrutiny in New York State, with the Innocence Project working to reform the law.
Now, the first reform we got was to mandate the recording of the custodial interrogation. That's a good reform. But what we found in so many cases, okay, there have been 48 false confession cases with their exonerations just in New York State. And in all those cases, the police used deception, some kind of lying, like in the Central Park 5 case, exonerated 5. They lied to each kid and told them, oh, your buddy said that you actually did it, you raped the woman. We want to eliminate that kind of tactic. We win against the prosecutors, we win in the courts, and so the most powerful feeling is that feeling of success and exhilaration of walking an innocent person into daylight.
Next, we introduce you to a Brooklyn man who spent more than 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. How he used survival skills he learned on the streets to endure his time behind bars.
Welcome back to this PIX11 News special, Presumed Guilty. I'm Ayana Harry. Derek Hamilton became a victim of the violent streets he grew up on, getting involved with petty crimes as a teenager, and that later evolved into a very ugly chapter when he was wrongfully convicted of a murder. We spoke with Hamilton, who's now exonerated after spending 20 years in prison.
Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy in the 80s and 90s were crack infested. There was a lot of crime. The term Bed-Stuy, do or die meant exactly that.
At an early age, Derek Hamilton learned how to fight for his survival. Raised during some of the city's most violent days.
This is the battlefield, as much a battlefield as the jungles of Vietnam.
I started being exposed to the neighborhood social norms, guys out fighting and gambling.
Hamilton's first encounter with the police came while he was just a teenager.
I was arrested for a robbery that I actually committed. I had a check cash in place of somebody coming out being dumb.
Over the next few years, Hamilton was in and out of jail, struggling to find his way as a young adult. Then in 1991, the course of his life changed forever as he was charged in the murder of Nathaniel Cash.
I know I didn't kill anybody. I was in New Haven, Connecticut.
There was only one eyewitness in the case. Initially, she told investigators that she didn't see the murder, but later changed her story, identifying Hamilton as the killer.
She says that she saw me with a single gun come to the building, shoot her boyfriend in the vestibule of the building where he died.
Still, Hamilton was found guilty of second-degree murder.
The judge sentenced me to 25 years of life. And I'm like, this cannot be happening.
For the next 2 decades, Hamilton, now prisoner 9385631, used the survival skills he learned on the streets of Brooklyn to endure in prison.
It was in some of the worst maximum security prisons there were. Racism was rampant. Guards was beating people up every single day. They was abusing people. And I was always a big mouth.
But that defiance often led to extended stays in solitary confinement.
It was the most degrading thing in the world. You would be in your cell 23 hours.
One of his darkest days came while he was in a segregated housing unit.
I attempted to take some pills. I said, I'm ready to die. Like, I don't want to be here. I'd rather die than sit in this another day.
So let me ask you, what then kept you going?
My faith in God, my prayers.
Hamilton had 2 lifelines. He kept in touch with his friend Nicole. She frequently made the long drive or bus ride upstate. That relationship grew. She is now his wife.
Once I actually seen his paperwork and I believed that he was actually innocent, I gave him my word as a woman that I would be there to support him no matter what.
Hamilton also found hope teaching himself the law. He read every legal book he could get his hands on. He started filing motions on his own behalf. And when he wasn't in solitary confinement, Hamilton was focused on making a case for himself and other prisoners who were innocent.
I began to organize guys in prison, but actual innocence team, a team of people in prison who's innocent.
The actual innocence team made a startling discovery. The same infamous Brooklyn detective that helped send Hamilton to prison did the same thing to these other men.
It was a detective by the name of Louis Scarcella. He framed me, he framed them.
In 2011, he was released from prison on parole and kept fighting to clear his name. And finally, in January of 2015, he got the news.
This is something that I feel obligated to do.
Ken Thompson, the Brooklyn DA at the time, moved to have Hamilton's conviction vacated. We were there when he learned he was finally exonerated.
That feels great, man. It's been a long time coming. I feel great.
After his exoneration, Derek Hamilton opened the Brownstone restaurant in Brooklyn with Shabaka Shakur. Shakur was also exonerated after a case worked by Detective Scarcella.
I did 27 years, 6 months.
Detective Scarcella has stood by his work over the years. Still, more than a dozen convictions based on his investigations have been overturned. Hamilton also continues to work as a paralegal and activist.
We're your constituents, right? You can't speak for us. We want to come out and speak for ourselves.
We visited Hamilton in his newest role. Hamilton mentors law students as they work on cases for the wrongfully convicted.
It's just enriching to see that they will comb through the record. I will comb through the record. They will see something I miss, or I will see something they miss.
And along with his wife, Nicole, Hamilton opened Friends and Families of the Wrongfully Convicted community space in Crown Heights.
This is the people's place. I am the voice for the voiceless. This organization is a voice for the voiceless.
The Brooklyn district attorney at the time made Derek Hamilton's exoneration possible. And now several prosecutors' offices in New York City have conviction integrity units. They work to root out wrongful conviction cases. One of those prosecutors is Queens DA Melinda Katz, who believes it's time to change the criminal justice system.
We are here about justice. We're not here only about prosecution.
Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz formed the Conviction Integrity Unit in January of 2020.
It is hard to believe that anyone could be so arrogant as to believe that mistakes don't happen in the criminal justice system.
People who believe they've been wrongfully convicted can fill out an online application. Katz says every application is reviewed. If they find a case they believe should be re-adjudicated, then the even tougher work begins.
But at the end of the day, these are facts that happened 20, 30 years ago. And so they are all in huge boxes, if you have them at all. There has been lost evidence along the way at certain points in Queens. And so we need to recreate what happened. We vacated, since I've been here, 71 cases.
Many of the wrongfully convicted cases date back to the 80s and 90s. So what's the difference between then and now?
Every decade's different. Criminal justice shouldn't be that different. Criminal justice should be what's right and wrong.
And there is another factor, technology.
And that's really what a lot of this is about, is new evidence that's uncovered, new DNA data, new ways of looking at it and analyzing it.
Katz believes this unit is an integral part of making sure justice is served. The CIU's work has led to several exonerations, including Carlton Roman, Shamel Capers, and the 3 men wrongfully convicted of killing an off-duty NYPD officer, George Bell, Rohan Bolt, and Gary Johnson.
Conviction integrity units are extremely important in today's society. People need to have faith in what we are doing as prosecutors.
When we come back, what led a New Jersey man to falsely confess to a rape, putting him in prison for 18 years?
Welcome back to this PIX11 News special Presumed Guilty. I'm Ayanna Harry. After falsely confessing to a violent rape, Rodney Roberts found himself in prison for 18 years. We spoke with him about why he confessed to the crime and what it took to finally walk free.
The first night I cried. It's the sound you hear when you hear the prison doors close.
They were tears of hopelessness.
And I couldn't understand why, you know what I'm saying, why me?
1996, Newark, New Jersey. Before his arrest, Rodney Roberts was a young single father with a new apartment, a new job, and a positive outlook.
I just felt like I was ready, about to take over the world. I mean, my son about to do it.
But after a fight with a friend, Roberts was arrested. And while he was in jail, investigators approached him about another incident.
And said, hey, you've been identified in this case.
It involved a 17-year-old girl who was pulled from the street, dragged into a parking lot, and raped. Prosecutors told Roberts he was ID'd by the victim in a photo lineup.
And I'm like, that's impossible. I didn't do anything. I'm innocent of all that. My bail was a ransom.
Roberts sat in jail for weeks, away from his son as pressure mounted.
It was my attorney who coerced me. It was my attorney who tricked me.
Despite maintaining his innocence from the very beginning, Roberts says he was given 25 minutes to make a life-changing decision, advised by his attorney to take a plea deal instead of going to trial.
If you go to trial, they're going to give you life in prison.
Roberts pled guilty to kidnapping. Prosecutors dismissed the sexual assault charge.
In the beginning stages of being locked up, I had to fight off depression. I felt like hopeless.
After serving his full sentence, Roberts thought he was going home.
I could have a strange twist to my case.
The Attorney General of New Jersey filed a court order to have Roberts committed as a sexually violent predator.
So I was held civilly even after my criminal sentence in this crazy facility that I had never even heard of, called the Special Treatment Unit.
Roberts hired an investigator who tracked down the victim in the case.
And to come to find out that she never even identified me, no, she never knew anyone was locked up, and she became like my champion.
A rape kit supposedly lost years ago was finally found.
The DNA test and concluded that I was completely exonerated.
He walked into prison in 1996. In 2014, he walked out. The first few years back home weren't easy. The emotional toll from being locked up for 18 years weighed heavily on Roberts, but he slowly began finding his way. He recently opened this restaurant, It's a Wrap and More. Roberts now working to build his community, and at the same time, still struggling to forgive himself.
I mean, I didn't plead guilty out of stupidity. I pled guilty out of fear.
Coming up next, a high school student who cared for his brother with Down syndrome is falsely convicted of rape and kidnapping. The heavy emotional toll after 25 years in lockup. We'll be right back.
It's like times I feel I've really adjusted. But there's times like I could be walking down the street and I hear a loud boom and I'm like, oh my God. Or somebody yell loud, like not turn around thinking somebody about to fight. Me like really got it all together? No, I can't sit there and say I got it all together. I'll be lying to you if I say I got it all together, you know.
Wrongful convictions are life-altering experiences with unimaginable consequences. While many of the exonerees have received some sort of compensation, dozens have not, and 14 states have no compensation at all. The most common causes of wrongful conviction, according to the Innocence Project, 63% involved eyewitness misidentification, 53% involved misapplied forensic science, 27% involved false confessions, and 19% involved informants. Since 1993, the Innocence Project has received over 65,000 letters from incarcerated people looking for help to prove their innocence. If you want to learn more about the Innocence Project and how you can help, head to our website, PIX11.com, and click on the link that says Innocence Project. Thank you for joining us for this PIX11 News special, Presumed Guilty. From the Gate of the Exonerated, I'm Mayana Harry. Good night.